Since being elected Prime Minister of Australia in 2022, Anthony Albanese has been presented as the everyman compared to his predecessors, and has built a platform based on his own upbringing in public housing to a single mum in Sydney's inner west that inspired his promise to Australia to fight for the middle class and lower the cost of living. However, the leader's relatively passive approach to policy has left many with a sense of disillusionment and has raised questions about his suitability to deal with the high-stakes issues the country faces. And with the recent purchase of a $4.3 million beach house during a cost of living crisis, and revelations about his relationship with Albo and Joyce, are we expecting too much from our Prime Minister? Or is he out of touch with the very people he wanted to uplift? When it comes to the cost of living, Prime Minister Albanese has said he and his government are doing the lot, but has faced criticism around a lack of communication and definitive policy. In what may be both an answer to public concern and political motivation, the Labor government announced energy bill relief, capped coal prices, and assistance for childcare. But thanks to rent gouging and lack of sufficient housing, the cost of living remains high. Measures such as lowering student debt by up to 20%, which was announced over the weekend, are one way to ease the strain on young Australians, and is one step closer to easing the country's financial strain. But clearly, it is not an easy fix, nor a fast one. And with only 3 sitting weeks of Parliament left for the year, it is clear the Albanese government must continue to focus on communicable and effective protections on costs to make a dent in the housing crisis and earn back some of the trust of his voters. Opposition leader Peter Dutton, who has proven to be the hard man whilst the Prime Minister experiences so-called conflict fatigue, has continued to criticise Labor's lack of communication. The failed Voice to Parliament referendum was called a distraction, with Dutton accusing the divisive campaign of not only sidelining bigger issues the country is facing, but also failing to provide detail on the advisory body. That's why Australians are angry. What sort of Prime Minister says to the Australian public, "I'll explain to you what it is you're voting for after you vote"? With grocery prices and interest rates continuing to jump and his poll ratings falling, perhaps Albo's low-key, conciliatory approach is no longer a comfort to the Australian public. During an already turbulent relationship between Qantas and consumers, Albanese's relationship with ex-CEO Albo and Joyce is now being considered more than strictly professional, suggesting potential perks for both parties. Of particular interest is not necessarily disaccounted flights, but the contrasting description of the relationship, one which Albanese is now distancing himself from, and whether this is related to the government's decision to block Qatar Airways expansion in Australia. In addition, Peter Dutton has fueled accusations that the mutually beneficial relationship extended back to Albanese's time as Minister for Transport, where upgrades and discounts could have affected decision-making, and suggesting a potential conflict of interest. However, until such time when the truth about Albanese's history with Joyce is revealed, the polls suggest he will need to put in the work to regain confidence and trust potentially lost before the election next year. With issues such as environmental decline and the war in Gaza to attend to, it is clear the Prime Ministership is not a simple role, and it can be easy for many not in power to criticise decisions. Anthony Albanese has presented himself as a relatable and fairly friendly politician, but perhaps his less confrontational yet well-meaning leadership style is not what the country needs during tough times. Perhaps the question is less whether Albo is out of touch, but whether he is able to develop a tougher skin to do the heavy lifting Australia needs. Yet nothing is set in stone, and whether or not the tide has turned on Albo will not be clear until 2025, when Australians go to the polls and decide if Anthony Albanese is a one-term Prime Minister.